Good morning. In today's video, I'll talk of Operation Sindoor that was conducted by the Indian Air Force against Pakistan on the night of 6-7th May between 1 and 1:30. The official press release which came from the government, it said that the Indian Air Force, without crossing the line of control using standoff attacks, it hit 9 terrorist camps in Pakistan and Pakistan occupied Kashmir. One of the terrorist camp was at Bhavalpur, so we are talking about 100 kilometers from the line of control. This is the range of the standoff weapons which were used by the Indian Air Force. So the targets were not military targets, the targets were the launch pads. As we know, the camp and the launch pads are temporary, they are not permanent things. Now, what happened was that in the daytime, Foreign Secretary Misri, he held a press interaction. It was not an interaction, a press briefing, because he never took any questions. In the press briefing, whereas the whole job was done by the Indian Air Force, he did not even mention it. He said that it was the Indian Armed Forces which did the operation. And according to him, the operation was measured and it was non-escalatory. Now all this requires a bit of explanation, but let me start with why did he say armed forces and not Indian Air Force? When I connect the dots, I see that India Today television with Gaurav Samant as the anchor, they do a video in the morning, early morning, where their man on the ground, he says that the Srinagar airport has been closed, the civilian airport, and one jet has crashed with the parts all scattered in Pampore, which is South Kashmir. And he said that the Indian Air Force personnel have come, Indian Air Force commandos have come, and they have cordoned off the whole area. And then he also said that 3 such similar instances have been reported in Jammu and Kashmir. That means in J&K, a total of at least 3 jets crashed on the night of 6-7th May. And everywhere the Indian Air Force personnel were there. Similarly, news came in the Indian Express and the Hindu newspaper, which of course Hindu withdrew that news in about 45 minutes, which said that one jet had crashed near Bhatinda Air Force Base. 1 person died and 9 were injured. So we are talking now of 4 jet crashes where the Indian Air Force personnel were present. It was not clearly said whether this was, what flights were these, were they the fighter jets, but the very fact that the Indian Air Force personnel were present there is something that needed to be explained by Foreign Secretary Misri, but he ignored the whole thing. Why he should have explained this? Because on the other side, the Pakistan Air Force made these claims that we have downed 4 or 5 of Indian Air Force fighter aircraft. This claim has been made. So it was the responsibility, if you are talking of you having a media interaction, you have to bring up this subject. How is it that on 6-7th night this coincidence happens in Jammu and Kashmir and in Punjab? But he said, while not taking any questions from the media, that look, the operation is still going on. I don't think so. The operation is over. Because if you look at the claim made by the Pakistan Air Force, they have already accomplished what they had set out to accomplish. There is nothing further for them to accomplish. There is plenty for the Indian side to explain. Now, next, as I said, he spoke about non-escalatory. Now, there is nothing non-escalatory about the Indian Air Force or Indian or air power anywhere in the world. If you see the core competencies or the key characteristics of Air Force, they are all escalatory. Because the key characteristics of any Air Force are range, then it is flexibility to quickly move from one theatre of war to another theatre of war. Then it has today's standoff weapons that can shoot from long ranges. Then it has a whole range of technology for real-time situation awareness. So the point to make here is that Air Force is escalatory in nature. It needs to be used employing the core competencies optimally. Why? I will explain in a while. The other word that he used was that the response was measured. Of course, it was measured. As I have said in my earlier videos also, that if the Indian Air Force this time it breaches the Pakistan airspace, then the response from the other side will be hard and swift. It will lead to an escalation that neither side will be able to control, and it will be an all-out war. Because if we see what happened in 2019 in Operation Bandar, they were caught unaware, and next day the Pakistan Air Force, it responded with Operation Swift Retort, and we know what happened during Swift Retort. Now, so the point to make here is, why are we using air power suboptimally? To begin with, there is a very interesting thing that has happened, which should not have happened. That in the last 10 years that Prime Minister Modi has been in power, the use of air power has become the new normal in crisis situation. We saw in Operation Bandar, and we are seeing in Operation Sindoor. Now what this means is, when you use an escalatory force as a force which is not to cross the line of control in a non-escalatory manner, at a time when warfare has changed even between India and Pakistan, we are doing a disservice to the country. I'll explain. You see, until now, what happened was that the technology in the air forces, both of India and Pakistan, I'm just referring to India and Pakistan here. So we didn't have much technology, so the doctrines were different. And the doctrines were that air power of both sides, it was always in support of the army. So army was supposed to do the main task, the heavy lifting, and the air forces were supposed to provide a limited air cover, which is what is used to be called combat air support. As a consequence of that, what used to happen is that the armies cannot do much, because the soldiers can only go this much, or the tanks can only go this much, especially when we are talking of line of control, we are talking of high altitude, we are talking of mountainous regions. As a result of which, the military line which was created in the first war of Kashmir on 1st of January 1949, it still remains on ground as the line of control, because in all the wars that the two sides have fought, Indian military, now when we talk of a land war, we are talking of the two armies and the two air forces working in coordination to a war plan. So Indian military was never able to obliterate or defeat the Pakistan military decisively so as to be able to obliterate the military line, but the situation has changed now. How it has changed is that with the induction of technology, so much of technology has come in Pakistan Air Force, Indian Air Force. The consequence of that is that the war winning factor will be the air forces. It is the air forces which will be called upon to first create an air superiority. If not an air superiority, then a defined, very clear, limited air superiority. And under the cover of that, the army would move forward and perhaps move much faster, because to occupy the territory, because the ground has to be held that the army will hold. But as I said, the air power has a very important role to play. So when you bring your air power in these situations, then what is happening is that air power is losing your deterrence and your military power is losing your deterrence. Why? Because as we saw in the case of Operation Bandar and the case of Operation Sindoor, the limitations, the shortcomings of the Indian Air Force, they are getting exposed. The enemy gets to know. As a consequence of that, the military power it weakens, it doesn't strengthen. Now, Misri made the point that by doing Operation Sindoor, we have punished Pakistan and we have deterred Pakistan. No, it is not true. The reverse has happened. Because what is deterrence? For deterrence, you don't have to get into a crisis like situation or get into a war situation. Deterrence simply means that the enemy is constantly gauging your capabilities both in the army, air force and the navy. It is seeing that how good they are and whether he has the military option to use or not, because he's considering that, and that is called deterrence. He is getting deterred. Now, by repeatedly putting your air force out like this, you are not increasing your deterrence, you are decreasing your deterrence, and hence Pakistan is not punished. And I will not be surprised if the terrorist attack, they don't diminish but they increase in Jammu and Kashmir, and God forbid perhaps in other parts of India as well. So everybody has to be honest and think about this Operation Sindoor, what has been accomplished, what should have been accomplished, and was it necessary. Thank you very much.